The high-frequency emergency klaxons inside the supreme citadel of the High Council did not merely blare. They tore through the vaulted crystal ceilings of the assembly hall in a terrifying, dual-tone screech that sent 300 galactic delegates scrambling from their floating thrones. Above the central star table, the automated defense grid flickered from a serene gold to a blinding, continuous crimson. Critical system breach in progress. Sector 1 Sol System. Quantum barrier integrity collapsing. High Fleet Master Valen, an 11-foot-tall, 6-armed Krellian warlord whose bio-armored scales were decorated with 3 centuries of unbroken galactic conquest, stood at the head of the obsidian dais. His 4 yellow ocular sensors flared in sudden, furious confusion as he slammed all 6 claws onto the command console. "Silence those defective sirens!" Valen's synthesized voice roared, vibrating the massive iron pillars supporting the dome. "The Sol barrier is absolute. 50 years ago, the High Council deployed 3,000 Dyson-class resonance anchors around the human home system, a solid energy cage 3 feet thick, locked down to the atomic level. Nothing gets out, and nothing gets in. Report the true diagnostic." At the lower tactical terminal, Chief Technocrat Vraxis raised his multi-jointed hands, his optical stalks shaking so violently that his formal silk robes rustled like dry leaves in a storm. "Fleet Master, the diagnostic is correct," Vraxis whimpered, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror. "The resonance anchors near Earth's orbital plane are not failing due to technical decay. They are being forcibly sheared apart from the inside." Valen sneered, his heavy mandibles clicking in disdain. "Absurd. Humanity was stripped of their deep space fleet during the blockade of 2076. They were left with primitive ground-based industrial power and atmospheric transports. They do not possess the kinetic or plasma capacity to scratch a Class 9 resonance shield. They are not using kinetic rounds, Fleet Master," Vraxis shrieked, projecting a high-resolution orbital feed onto the central holomap. "Look at the energy readings." The entire war chamber fell dead silent. The visual recording played in horrific, scientifically impossible detail. For 50 long years, humanity had lived under a dark, artificial sky, trapped beneath a glowing, golden cage that blocked out the stars, cut off all interstellar commerce, and forced them to watch the galaxy prosper while they withered in isolation. The High Council had assumed that 5 decades of darkness would break the human spirit, reducing a proud, stubborn death-world species to a compliant, begging colony. They had severely miscalculated what humans do when you lock them in the dark. On the holomap, the blue surface of Earth was no longer quiet. Across the entire North American continent, Western Europe, and the Asian landmass, thousands of massive, subterranean cooling towers were venting miles-high plumes of superheated plasma steam into the upper atmosphere. Humanity hadn't spent 50 years begging for mercy. They had spent 50 years converting their entire planet's molten core into a single planetary-scale power grid. And in orbit, resting just below the glowing golden cage, floated an object that made 40 regional admirals forget how to breathe. It wasn't a starship. It had no bridge, no landing bays, and no ion thrusters. It was a central spinal rail, a 4,000-mile-long cylinder of solid tungsten carbide, cold-rolled steel, and high-density superconductor coils, wrapped entirely around Earth's equator like an artificial iron ring. "By the ancestors!" an avian diplomat gasped, dropping his jewel-encrusted staff onto the marble floor. "They didn't build a fleet. They turned their entire planet into a weapon." Project designation identified from uncensored human radio broadcasts. Vraxis whispered, his voice trembling so hard the audio feed distorted. "They call it Project Zeus." Before Valen could scream another command, the 4,000-mile iron ring in the holomap ignited. A blinding surge of pure, raw electricity, harvested directly from the thermal pressure of Earth's liquid iron core, channeled through the superconductor coils in a microsecond. The kinetic energy generated by the magnetic loop was so immense that it distorted the local gravity vector of Earth's moon. Boom! There was no sound in the vacuum of space, but the visual shockwave was catastrophic. A single 80,000-ton projectile of solid hyperdense tungsten, moving at 12% the speed of light, punched squarely into the center of the Dyson-class resonance barrier. The 3-foot-thick energy shield, built to withstand supernovae and sustained orbital fleet bombardments, didn't bend. It didn't absorb the impact. It shattered like a cheap sheet of glass under a sledgehammer, sending a shockwave of blinding white plasma tearing through 300 surrounding anchor stations, vaporizing them instantly. The 50-year containment cage of the Sol system was erased in less than 2 seconds. And the 8,000-ton tungsten slug didn't stop there. Driven by raw relativistic momentum, the projectile tore out into deep space, slicing straight through a nearby High Council surveillance station, reducing a 40 billion credit orbital installation to a cloud of fine metallic dust before disappearing into the void toward the outer rim. A cold, suffocating silence suffocated the Grand War Chamber. 300 alien commanders, shipwrights, and diplomats stood frozen at the viewports, staring at the dark holomap where the impenetrable shield used to sit. Suddenly, the central tactical table flickered, overriding the Council's master security encryption. A live, unencrypted broadcast flooded every terminal, screen, and communicator across the High Citadel, originating from a heavy concrete bunker buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps. On the screen stood a man. He was 65 years old, wearing a faded, grease-stained Terran High Command jacket with frayed collar pins. He had short gray hair, a severe scar running down his right cheek, and held a lit wooden match to a cigar between his teeth. He didn't look like a noble galactic leader. He had no glowing robes, no bioarmor, and no synthesized voice filters. He took a slow, deep pull of his cigar, blew a thin trail of blue smoke toward the camera, and looked straight through the feed into Fleet Master Valen's trembling yellow eyes. "This is General Marcus Vance of the United Earth Defense Council," the man said. His voice was low, raspy, and carried a flat, freezing stillness that made the temperature in the war chamber feel like it had dropped 20 degrees. Valen stepped up to the podium, forcing his 6 claws to stop shaking as he puffed out his bio-chitin chest. "Human!" Valen roared into the comms, his voice cracking with desperate rage. "You have committed an illegal act of interstellar aggression. You have destroyed Council property and breached a Galactic Accord treaty. If you move another ship past your orbital line, our Grand Armada will." "We don't have any ships coming out, Fleet Master," Vance interrupted softly. Valen paused, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. "What?" Vance leaned forward, resting his heavy, calloused forearms on his command desk, the tip of his cigar glowing cherry red in the dark room. "We didn't build ships while we were locked in here," Vance explained, his pale blue eyes locking onto the screen with absolute, unyielding focus. "Ships are expensive, they require crews, and they take time to travel across the stars. So we decided to simplify the process." Vance tapped a control on his console. The tactical map updated, revealing that the 4,000-mile iron ring around Earth was not locked in a static orbit. The entire magnetic assembly was slowly rotating on a massive 3-axis gimbal, aligning its primary firing vector directly toward the core sectors of the High Council's territory. "Project Zeus has a charge time of 3 minutes, Vance said, his voice dropping into a gravelly whisper that echoed off the high marble walls of the Citadel. "It fires an 80,000-ton slug at 12% light speed. No shield in this galaxy can stop it, and no fleet can intercept it." Valen's lower mandibles twitched in pure, absolute horror as his tactical computer calculated the math. A projectile of that mass moving at that speed wouldn't just destroy a starship. If aimed at a planet, it would punch through the crust and crack the continental shelf in half. You built a planetary sniper rifle," Valen rasped, his synthesized voice fading to a fraction of a whisper. "You sealed us in the dark for 50 years because you thought we were too dangerous to let out," Vance said, reaching out to tap the ash off his cigar. "You were right." Vance stood up from his chair, pulling his military cap low over his eyes. "We're turning off the targeting laser for the next 10 minutes, Vance concluded flatly. "In those 10 minutes, I expect an official, unconditional apology from your council, the immediate removal of all remaining blockades in our neighboring sectors, and a full economic trade treaty delivered to my desk." He looked back up at the camera, his cold eyes burning through the screen. "If we don't receive that treaty before my cigar burns out," Vance whispered, "our next shot isn't going to be aimed at a shield anchor." The screen snapped to black. In the supreme citadel of the High Council, a dead, terrifying silence reigned. 300 elite alien leaders stood motionless, staring at the blank screen, then out at the dark stars where an invisible iron ring was currently humming with 4 billion gigawatts of planetary power. High Fleet Master Valen slowly sank back into his floating throne, his 6 arms hanging completely limp at his sides, his bio-armor suddenly feeling very thin and very cold. Without saying a single word, Valen reached out with a trembling claw, opened the master administrative slate of the Galactic Accord, and completely deleted the file titled Terran Containment Protocol. In its place, he opened a fresh document, set the priority tag to immediate diplomatic surrender, and began typing as fast as his claws could move.